Hi, everyone. This is a Leadership with Heart podcast, and this is Heather Younger, your host. Employee experience is powered by emotions. Managers and or leaders within organizations get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. Leaders, meaning supervisors or above in an organization, drive much of the positive or negative emotions by their actions or inactions, their words, or what they fail to say. When a manager chooses their words and their actions carefully, they exhibit great emotional intelligence. These managers are often thought of as leaders who care, or as I like to call them, leaders with heart. This special brand of leader drives engagement and loyalty simply by being themselves. Are these leaders perfect? Absolutely not. It is in their awareness and sharing of some of their imperfections that we realize their brilliance. In this podcast, I ask you to see yourself in the stories my guests tell about times when they were not the best versions of themselves, but how they used their hearts to guide them to a place of deeper connection with their teams and heightened leadership prowess. Enjoy. Hi, everybody. This is Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast, and I am super excited to have Frank Ricotta on the phone today. So there's someone I know that works with him, but there was a posting on LinkedIn, an article that I believe he had written. It was just a general article he had written, and you'll clarify this for me here in a minute, Frank. But I love the tone and the tenor of it. It was very open-hearted, very kind of transparent and down to earth and accessible. And it just spoke to me. And so I immediately reached out to the person I knew who represents him on the social space. And I said, okay, I'm going to have him on the show. Let's get him on the show. I want him on the show. So that's why you're here. Welcome.
Oh, well, I'm happy to be here. And thanks for reading the article too.
Yeah. You're like, people actually do read those things. I'll make sure to put that as well in the show notes so you can go check those out at the customerfanatics.com location as well for whoever is listening right now. So, Frank, where are you right now anyway in your leadership journey?
I'm in that stage in life where it's really been more of a mentoring phase for me, knowing that hopefully BurstIQ will be, towards the end of my career, and I would love to really pass on all the things I've learned over the years, the good, the bad, and the ugly, to a next generation of leaders that can go out there and truly be servant leaders.
Oh, I love that. Well, I love the idea of, the way you see your role is of uplifting others and helping them grow. And I think that's actually kind of unique too, in being not like a medium or large company. Oftentimes the focus is on scaling, on funding rounds, on all these other things. And some of the stuff you talked about in that leadership journey really are about uplifting people. And so I'm curious to know, where did your drive to lead come from?
Oh, that's a long story. So, I went to college at the United States Air Force Academy, and leadership is a 4-year curriculum when you go to one of the service academies. And then even when you graduate, you're required to go to a number of leadership schools and courses in a whole continuing education process. And so it was instilled in me early on in my career, but even growing up, I kind of liked to always be in the leadership position, or at least an influential position.
Wow, I think that's my son is in Civil Air Patrol. He's just 13, just turned 13, and he's been in it for a year now. And so his goal is to go to the academy. So it always just tickles me pink when I hear someone who's already been in it, and also all of the education. Because my husband's been talking it up for a long time, and he is not a graduate, but he, just says, wow, not only is it a free education, it's an education that's so fruitful, and how much they give you, how much value that's delivered, and how much you learn about leadership early on. And oh man, it's so we're kind of excited about his journey. We'll see if he ends up fulfilling that destination, but I think the journey itself is an exciting one he's on. He loves it.
Well, I mean, he's starting out in the right position, and right mental set. You really have to want to pursue that path, especially if you're going to make it through an academy journey. It can be very demanding, not just academically, but physically and mentally as well.
Yeah, and we look at our kids too and think he is definitely the not just for the physical perspective, he loves to compete, but he's mentally strong. And it's hard to see that much strength, or hard to usually see that much strength in a kid. So to see how he's such a leader naturally in the home, and it's cool to see that in so many ways. I talk about leadership. yes, I lead them, but there's so many ways that they lead me. I learned so much from them about leadership, and he's one of them for sure. It's interesting.
Well,
So, go ahead.
I just as a side note, that if you're not learning from all the people around you, then you can't really be an effective leader anyway. I mean, when you take learning from your kids, you have to learn from them in terms of even some of their own leadership styles you can incorporate, but also what's best in terms of how they respond to you as a parent and really as a leader in your house.
Yeah, it's a good perspective. And because I think too, if they know that you're willing to learn and you kind of like you admit mistakes or you change direction based upon what it is they say to you, then they see that their voice has power, that they're important, that when they actually communicate effectively, it means something to even adults, and that they can change their current situation instead of feeling out of control.
That's right.
Which we see a lot in our country. So that's a good point that you bring up. So what do you think? How would the people that report to you describe your leadership style? What would they say of you?
From a self perspective, or what they would say. I mean, from a self perspective, I'm probably my hardest critic. I'm most critical of things I do and how I respond in different situations. And I would think they would say that I'm mostly a nurturing leader. That would set a very aggressive and bold vision, and really work to get the team empowered to go execute on that vision. At least I hope that's what they would say.
Nice. Well, that's good. I mean, I think all those are the two things that you just said, the nurturing, and then this idea of having the bold vision, and then expecting kind of execution and being there to support along the way, is not something we always find together. Often it's one or the other. It's like the super nurturing person that doesn't hold people accountable, have a vision that's compelling that people want to move towards, or it's the one that's visionary, expects the things going, but maybe the nurturing falls to the side. Yeah. So the fact that you think that they would describe you as both means that you're, unique based on all the interviews I've done and research I've done in this space. So good for you.
Oh, thank you. Well, people perform best when they're happy, and you can set high expectations and high goals, and not have to be unkind about it. When you're lifting, the key is really lifting people up to be the best that they can be, and particularly to be the best they can be in the context of a team, and creating high performance team where they're happy and motivated, and they're really energized to achieve the same goals you'd like the company to achieve.
Love it. So, okay, I'm curious to know if you can recall a time when maybe you weren't the best version of you, like maybe that nurturing side or that visionary side, something just, it was not revealing itself to the people you lead, and they saw it, or you saw it. What would that story look like? Can you tell us that story was, and then also what you did to come out of that particular time?
Yeah, I think I went through a pretty low period in my career. As my first startup was, basically like one of my kids. It had a lot of what I hoped to achieve in life, all built in there in terms of philosophy, how to run a company, and how to grow it, how to grow up a company in a crazy world. And then along came, I'm going to date myself here. Then along came, the bubble, the internet bubble, or the tech bubble in 2000. And that company, we went, started with just two or three of us, and grew that up to several hundred with offices around the world. And when we hit the bubble period, had to basically sell it to another company, and it was one of the worst things for me emotionally to go through. But then on the backside, what I lost for a period of time was I lost my own personal passion and my own drive. And it wasn't just a matter of weeks. It actually extended for a period of time where, I wasn't I wasn't operating as a CEO. I was still a C-level executive, but it was acting more like a job than really pursuing my passion. And we finally got to a point and said, it's time to go back and connect what I really want to do down deep in my heart and go pursue that. And then everything started falling back in place. And if you don't believe where you're going, you don't have the passion behind it, it's hard to motivate and lead people to achieve anything at all, because they don't view you as authentic.
What was the catalyst for you? Like there, sometimes, usually there's something that kind of kicks us in the bum that makes us go, wait a second, there's a different way to do this, or I need to move and change right now. What was that catalyst for you?
I would say my family more than anything, because there was in some of that period, my kids look back and say, yeah, that was your grumpy dad period. My kids now are mid-20s and early 30s. So they said, that was grumpy dad period. And I said, yeah, I wasn't a very nice person to be around. And my wife, God bless her, she stuck with me through that window as well, and really helped me pull it out and help me, again, refocus on what was important in life, not just from a work perspective, but from a total balance perspective. And that was really the catalyst, them loving me through it more than anything.
Love it. That's amazing. I mean, I think that we need people around us as leaders. We have to have that support system. We have to have, if they're there to awaken us to who we can be, what's possible in us. And that's what we should be for others. So we should do this, get this for ourselves, a kind of self-care component of being surrounded by people who care for us and will tell us things authentically and transparently and timely, right? And then we need to then reciprocate and do the same thing for our people, because the more they sit in that, they just like wallow, right?
Yeah, and you have to recognize too when you're pushing people out of balance. And early on in my career, it was all focused about, when you talk about what are you nurturing, are you driving, there's a lot of the drive, and that becomes the primary factor, and you lose the fact that you're starting to hurt your own team by driving them too hard, and not letting them maintain their balance and productivity. And that's, we should never confuse activity with productivity. And if you don't create the environment where people can refresh their mind and their body and their health and even their spirit, and give them time to do that, it's hard to sustain anything for any length of time.
Interesting. So I'm curious to know, with everything that's going on, and I don't know if you travel a lot. Do you travel a lot in your current role, or?
It was quite extensive until the shutdown. In fact, I was probably going to be traveling all of March, actually, most out of the country.
Wow. So that's my next question is, what do you do when you are, and everybody's kind of disconnected from a proximity perspective, and that's where we're at now. But what do you do to reconnect with your team in a deeper way?
Well, I think in multiple levels is one is you have to have a regular cadence, where you're focused on the actual delivery side of life. So, they know there's going to be a consistent amount of communication, that it's an open environment especially to share any problems, so we can problem solve collectively as a team. And so that normalcy and cadence is really important. So regardless of where you are on the planet, you have to maintain that normalcy of cadence. And if I'm in a different time zone, that means sometimes maybe adjusting what I'm doing, even from a sleep perspective, be part of those cadences, or at least communicating kind of key topics for those meetings. And my co-founder and I, we share a lot of those kind of tasks. But then the other thing is if we're small enough now where having that personal connection and reach out and just asking those you're asking a lot of and how they're doing, and if nothing else, a good laugh, a joke, even if it's a text or some other way of letting them know, hey, I'm thinking about you, and I think you're doing a good job.
That's good. Sometimes it's just, most of the time, it's the little things that count, right? It's often we think we need to make huge gestures, and sometimes we do bigger gestures depending on what's what. For example, if you're bringing a new client, maybe a bonus is something you do. But if it's just like an everyday thing, but they're going over and above for something, maybe it doesn't produce revenue, but it's helping the company move the company forward in some way. It's just showing them that you care and that you appreciate them that makes all the difference. And I think we underestimate the value of that until we're in the position where we actually are on the receiving end. And then we know that it feels good.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, money only goes so far. I mean, uh, don't don't get me wrong. People are focused on what their earning potential is, and they should, rightly so, be paid according to what they're worth in the marketplace. But that's not the top factor that keeps people on your team. Without moving around, it's really all the incidentals around it. And I'm not talking about benefits, but it's the culture and the environment and their fit in that environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I know when we're talking about it, it sounds so intuitive.
It
It's just
doesn't.
that not everybody's doing it, right?
But it's hard. It really. It's not.
Yep.
I'm not saying it's hard because we're talking about things we're doing, but it's because I have good balance with my co-founder. We really work well together. We have different personality types, and so that makes a big difference as well. But a lot of people discount the importance of that, or it's not defined enough per se, and they think the immediacy of rewards fills some of the gaps, and so you have to really think about it. You have to know your people, you have to know your team, and what each person has different motivating factors, and if you can replicate at scale the ability to tap into what motivates a person versus kind of the general gestures, that's the best place to be, and it's not an easy thing to do in scale.
Yeah, that's a very good point. The cookie cutter stuff just does not work. I mean, there are general things that, like when I write articles, or I speak, or we may make generalizations, but in the end, it is about building a relationship. When you build a relationship, it's going to have to be customized.
Yep.
It's going to have to be personalized. You have to figure out what the needs of the people are, and not always look at them as a homogenous group, because in all cases, they're probably different in some nuanced way that makes their experience so much different. And like with your organization, you really, again, growing and scaling and doing well, you want your people to stay, because losing right now is going to hurt you way more than just trying to make sure you take care of them from an experience perspective.
Oh, sure. And and when we talk about that, is when you're looking at your team, everybody has a different set of goals. I mean, not all your execution superstars necessarily want to move in a position of leadership or management because they really like doing what they do in an execution perspective. And this is very true for technical talent. And so how do you nurture that forward in a way for exponential contribution, without saying, okay, if you want to get past that income level or that status level, you have to head over into management, which makes a lot of them miserable. So that's a really key point in terms of understanding what drives each person.
I love it. So for the leaders who are listening right now, who might just need a little bit extra motivation in their week, to get them through this crazy crisis that's happening right now. It's a crisis in many ways, but then again, it's also a blessing in many ways. I'm curious to know what words of wisdom or pearls of wisdom you might leave them with to wrap up the show.
Well, I think from a leadership perspective, it's really your job to set the course and set the tenor, even in uncertain times and situations. So a lot of it means taking a step back and running through a bunch of contingency alternatives. What's going to end up happening coming out of this, and even in the midst of this, is there are going to be opportunities presented to you as a business that you would have never had an opportunity to pursue without what is happening and what will happen. So running through a bunch of contingency plans in different scenarios, understanding how you might be able to take if it's a little bit of downtime in your business, how you might be able to, say, accelerate new product features or capabilities, or kind of reshuffle the deck a little bit in terms of how you might enter new things into the market or reposition things, and for that matter, even be able to create whole new things, which is what we did with a recent launch of a service we call Research Foundry. We took a step back and said, hey, there's an opportunity. This has been a vision of ours. There's an opportunity now to make it a reality, which is connect all these researchers and public health organizations and innovators together in really a collaborative way, and do so at a base level that's free and and usable no matter where you are in the world. So fill a need and fill a gap that people now recognize and say, gosh, I wish we had that. It may be now the time to go do something different and offer service in a market that has a different set of needs now.
I love that. I like, the iteration that's involved. It's involved in the journey of an organization, company, different sizes, whatever. But it's also, I love to think of it a leadership iteration too, right? Well, where we have to show up differently depending on the circumstances, the environment, internally and externally. And so depending on who's in front of us that day, what issues or concerns are in front of us that day, we have to show up differently. So for example, I say, like, right now in this crisis with COVID, let's go ahead and put it out there. There are, again, some positives and there's some things that kind of hurt. But at the same time, how you show up today does have ripple effect what looks like a year or two from now. But so I think that right now, that we need to show up with a little bit more strength and some vulnerability. There needs to be really a good balance of both, where I may not say that like for some other thing that might be happening, right? It just depends on the circumstance.
Well, the team around you actually many times has the answer. During a period of my time where one of my businesses and what I did for a living was consulting, and it used to always say, well, the expert is the stranger with a briefcase, and a lot of times it was pulling together the thoughts of the team in a way that could be communicated and received. And I think in this environment, it's changing mental outlooks on so many levels that if you engage with your team in that way, you might come up with some really good creative ideas. But the worst thing to do is do nothing and just kind of hide and hunker down. And I think that's the worst thing to do as a leader in uncertain times. It's really, and you may not be able to do anything, when you're through all the exercises, but the fact that you're engaging and listening to your team and understanding the changing nature of what's around you actually puts you all in a different framework. There was one thing when you asked early on what shaped my leadership career is early on in the Air Force, and one of the junior officer leadership program called Squadron Officer School. And one of the things they emphasized there, and they did at the academy, was this thing called OODA, and it's observe, orient, decide, act. And, they had studies from pilots during the Vietnam era and said, okay, the pilots with the fastest OODA loop tended to be the ones that survived the longest, and came out well on the other end. And again, it's one of those obvious things. If you can constantly maintain awareness of your surroundings and constantly learn, you'll be able to make quick decisions and act. And there isn't a single decision that's final. It's always, again, this whole agile method of decision and execution.
I love that. Yeah, agility is critical right now. And I mean, it's critical in any type of situation that's just, it presents itself as a little extreme, right? I think agility is important. And of course, large companies are always trying to work towards agility, whether there's a crisis or not. They always want to be able to change on a dime. If somebody who produces a product for them, they can't do it, they immediately are like, how do we change? How do we pivot? So these are all, this is all good. And hopefully those who are listening needed to hear some of these messages and maybe are in a place where they could benefit. So if you're listening right now and you did find value in my conversation with Frank, please do share it far and wide. Don't forget to write a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you might listen, because this is important stuff here. I do believe if you're listening, it's important because it helps you get better as a leader. Frank, this has been really good. I really appreciate it. I always find probably more value in actually listening into you all. I'm writing a book right now based upon the fundamentals of the podcast and the different leaders I've spoken to. And it's because I think there's so much special stuff there, so many great stories, and the leadership is truly exhibited, and you're no exception. So I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. Very kind.
So everyone, thanks for joining the Leadership of the Heart podcast. And again, thank you, Frank. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you again.
Have a great one, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. You can grab the show notes by visiting customerfanatics.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter.